Imagine for a moment that you finally made it. It's 1914. You are wealthy, successful, and you've commissioned the construction of your absolute dream home, a massive luxury country estate. We are talking about a project costing, what, upwards of $77,000?
And in today's money, that's millions.
Millions. This isn't just a house, it's a legacy. You specify everything down to the finest detail in the contract. The walls go up, the roof goes on, the family moves in. You live there for nearly a year, happy as can be.
It sounds perfect.
Yeah.
But I assume since we're here, the other shoe's about to drop.
Oh, it drops hard.
Yeah.
One day, you discover a problem. Deep inside the walls, buried behind plaster and, expensive finishes, the plumbing pipes aren't the brand you asked for. The contract said reading manufacturer. The builder used Cohos. Now here's the kicker. The pipes are identical in quality, same iron, same durability, same cost. But the name stamped on the metal is different.
So it's functionally the same.
Exactly. But you, being a stickler for the contract, you tell the builder, I don't care that it works. Tear down the walls, rip out the plumbing, rebuild the mansion with the right pipes. The builder refuses. You refuse to pay the final bill. Who wins?
That is the famous reading pipe disaster. It is the perfect storm of contract law because it forces us to choose sides.
Choose sides how?
Well, do we side with the strict black and white terms of a written agreement? Or do we look at the messy, expensive reality of construction and say, good enough is good enough?
Right. And that tension is our mission for this deep dive. We aren't just telling a story about plumbing. We are going to dissect the legal doctrine of substantial performance.
Right. And to do that, we have to map out our analytical path. We need to understand the critical distinction between promises that are dependent, meaning if you don't do this, the deal is off, and those that are independent or collateral. Our goal is to walk away with a clear diagnostic tool, a way to determine when a breach of contract is venial or forgivable versus when it's a willful transgression that demands a strict penalty.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get back to the mansion and the angry homeowner, I need to understand the tool we're using. How do we define the primary legal doctrine at play here? What exactly is substantial performance?
The general rule of substantial performance is, well, it's essentially a safety valve for contractors. In the old days of common law, if you missed one tiny detail in a contract, you breached and you got paid nothing.
That's harsh.
Incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
So the courts developed this rule. A contractor who has substantially performed their duties is entitled to the contract price, minus an allowance for any defects. They don't forfeit the entire payment just because of a minor error.
That sounds reasonable on the surface, but does this apply to every single part of a contract? I mean, if I hire a hitman, hypothetically of course, and he misses the target but scares him really bad, is that substantial performance?
Definitely not. And that brings us to the key distinction. This rule applies to independent or collateral promises. It does not apply to conditions that are strictly dependent.
A condition precedent.
Exactly. If a term is a condition precedent, something that absolutely must happen before payment is due substantial performance won't save you. You have to hit the mark 100%.
So if the contract says paint the house red and you paint it blue, that's a dependent condition failure.
Right.
But if you paint it red but miss a spot behind the rain gutter, that's independent.
Precisely. The fight in court is almost always about classifying the promise. Is it the main course or is it just the garnish?
And to see how this plays out, we have to look at the landmark case.
Yes. Jacob and Youngs, Inc. v. Kent, decided by the Court of Appeals of New York.
This is the case every law student sweats over.
That's one. It's the battleground where this rule was really tested.
All right, I want to get rigorous here. Let's analyze Jacob and Youngs v. Kent. First, what are the legally dispositive facts?
The plaintiff, Jacob and Youngs, built a country residence for the defendant, Mr. Kent. The total cost was over $77,000. The construction finished in June 1914, and the defendant moved in.
Okay, so far so good.
It wasn't until March 1915, so almost a year later, that the defendant learned about the plumbing. The contract specifications explicitly stated, all wrought iron pipe must be well galvanized, lap-welded pipe of the grade known as standard pipe of reading manufacture.
Okay, reading manufacture. That's very specific, and they didn't use Reading.
Not exclusively. The plaintiff used Cohos or other brands for about 60% of the work.
Wow, 60%.
And when the defendant found out, the architect who works for the defendant ordered the plaintiff to redo the work entirely.
Which would mean tearing things down.
Yes, because the pipes were encased in the walls. This would require demolishing substantial parts of the completed structure. We're talking smashing through plaster, tiling, and expensive woodwork.
And the plaintiff refused.
They refused to tear down the house. Consequently, the defendant refused to pay the remaining balance, which was about $3,483.
That's a significant chunk of money back then, but I have to ask, was the co-host pipe actually garbage? Was he trying to slip in cheap materials?
That is a crucial fact. The plaintiff tried to introduce evidence that the installed pipe was identical in quality, appearance, market value, and cost to the Riding pipe.
So it's just as good.
They were effectively the same thing, just manufactured in different places. The only difference was the name stamped on the pipe at intervals of 6 or 7 feet.
It feels like buying a generic drug versus the brand name. Chemically identical, just a different logo.
Exactly. But the owner wanted the brand name.
So with those facts on the table, let's pin it down. What was the core legal issue?
The issue is whether the use of the wrong brand of pipe was a breach of a condition precedent, barring any recovery, or if the plaintiff had substantially performed the contract, thereby restricting the defendant's remedy to damages, which, in this case would be nominal.
Okay, so it's all or nothing versus pay me, but I'll pay for the mistake. What rule of law did the court apply? Please state the full black-letter rule and break it down into its testable elements.
The court, led by the famous Judge Cardozo, applied the doctrine of substantial performance. The rule dictates that a contractor can recover the contract price less damages if 3 specific elements are met.
Okay, what's the first one?
Element 1. The omission or breach must be unintentional and not fraudulent. Essentially, it must be a venial fault rather than a willful one.
Got it. Element 2.
The defect must be trivial or insignificant in relation to the general purpose of the contract. This is the materiality test.
And the third?
Element 3. Enforcing strict performance would result in a grossly disproportionate forfeiture compared to the benefit obtained. Cardozo calls this the cruelty of enforced adherence.
Thank you. That gives us a roadmap. Now for the court's elemental analysis, let's walk through this step by step. How did the court apply the first element, intent?
For the first element, intent, the court looked at why the wrong pipe was used. The evidence sustained a finding that the omission was neither fraudulent nor willful.
So just a mistake.
It was the result of oversight and inattention by the plaintiff's subcontractor. Even the defendant's architect failed to notice the discrepancy upon delivery. Cardozo characterized this as a venial fault, a forgivable sin, basically.
Wait, I have to push back here. If I'm the homeowner, I'm thinking, you had one job, read the contract. Isn't oversight just a nice word for negligence?
You are echoing the dissent here. Judge McLaughlin, who disagreed with the majority, argued that this was gross neglect.
Right.
And in the dissent's view, gross neglect is the cousin of willfulness. If the breach is willful, the inquiry stops there. The transgressor pays the penalty.
But the majority didn't see it that way.
No, they held it was innocent oversight. They didn't see a scheme to cheat the owner, just a slip up in the supply chain.
Okay, so the court decided it wasn't a scam, just a blunder. Understood. Now what about the second element? Materiality and purpose.
Here, Cardozo analyzed the margin of departure. He noted that precise boundaries are impossible, but the context matters.
What do you mean?
In a contract for, say, common chattels, strict adherence is expected. But in the construction of a mansion or a skyscraper, the margin is different.
I see.
Cardozo found that using identical pipe with a different stamp was a trivial defect. The pipe was just as good in market value and quality.
Just as good. That phrase usually makes my blood boil when a mechanic says it.
And Cardozo specifically notes there is no general license to install whatever the builder thinks is just as good. However, he makes a fascinating distinction between fields of art and fields of mere utility.
Art versus utility. Break that down.
If you hire an artist to paint a portrait of your wife and they paint a landscape, that is a breach of the main purpose. Taste matters there.
Of course.
But plumbing pipes hidden in a wall, that's a field of utility. The pipe exists to carry water, not to be looked at.
So the purpose is purely functional.
Precisely. Since the co-host pipe carried water exactly as well as the Riding pipe, strict compliance matters less. The breach here did not frustrate the purpose of the contract.
So if I ordered a specific shade of blue tile for my bathroom and they used the slightly different blue, that might be art and I could force them to rip it out.
Likely, yes, because the look is the purpose, but the stamp on a hidden pipe, that's utility.
I see the distinction. Okay, let's move to the pivot point of the case. What about the third element, proportionality and damages?
This is where the rubber meets the road. Cardozo looked at the consequence of enforcing the strict terms. To put in the correct pipe, the builder would have to destroy the work they had already done.
The cost would be enormous.
Enormous. But the benefit to the owner, having the word reading on a pipe inside a wall, would be zero. Cardozo called this the cruelty of enforced adherence.
It's the punishment fitting the crime.
Exactly. He argued that the law should be slow to insist on a remedy that imposes such a massive burden for such a tiny nominal benefit. It violates the concept of equity.
And after analyzing all the elements, what was the court's final conclusion?
The court affirmed the judgment for the plaintiff. They concluded that the promise to install reading pipe was independent and collateral, not a dependent condition.
And the breach was trivial.
The breach was trivial, unintentional, and the cost of strict enforcement was oppressive. Therefore, the plaintiff is entitled to the payment.
But they don't get the full payment, right? There's a catch.
Correct. They get the payment minus the damages. But this brings us to the calculation of damages, which is where it gets really interesting.
This is the measure of allowance concept. Usually, if a contractor messes up, the rule is cost of replacement. You pay what it costs to fix it.
Right. And in this case, the cost of replacement is the cost of tearing down the walls and rebuilding. That's thousands of dollars.
But Cardozo didn't use that rule.
No. He said when the cost of completion is grossly and unfairly out of proportion to the good to be attained, the measure shifts. It becomes the difference in value.
So let's do the math. What is the difference in value between a house with Reading pipe and a house with co-host pipe?
Zero.
Zero.
Zero. The pipes are identical in quality and market price. The house isn't worth a penny less because of the switch. So the builder gets his full payment minus zero.
That feels like a magic trick. The builder breached the contract and the penalty is nothing.
It feels that way, doesn't it? But flip it around. If the court ruled the other way, the homeowner would get a perfectly good mansion plus he would keep the $3,400 final payment. He would be unjustly enriched because of a trivial mistake. The court is trying to prevent the homeowner from using a technicality to get a discount.
To really make this stick, I want to visualize it. Can you give us a concrete example, something visceral, to help us understand this difference in value versus cost of replacement rule?
Cardozo actually provides a perfect one in the text. Let's call it the granite foundation hypothetical. Picture this. You have a contract that calls for a foundation built of granite quarried specifically in Vermont.
Okay, Vermont granite. High quality stuff.
The builder blunders. They build the foundation using granite of the exact same quality, same density, same color, but it was quarried in New Hampshire.
Just across the state line, basically the same mountain range.
Precisely. But the contract said Vermont. Now, the building is finished. To fix this mistake, to get strict performance, you would have to tear down the entire building all the way to the foundation and start over.
That seems insane. We're talking about destroying a skyscraper because the rock came from 50 miles to the east.
That is the point. The omission using New Hampshire stone instead of Vermont stone does not affect the value of the building for use or otherwise. It's hardly appreciable.
So what's the result?
The result is that the owner cannot demand the building be torn down. They are entitled only to the difference in value.
And since the granite is the same quality,
the difference is likely nothing. They get zero, and the builder gets paid. The law will not allow the owner to use a trivial mistake to hold the contractor hostage.
But, and I have to play devil's advocate here, what if I just love Vermont? What if I'm a Vermont nationalist and I hate New Hampshire? Doesn't the contract mean anything?
It does, and Cardozo admits this is a dangerous path. He says the lines are wavering and blurred, but he concludes that equity and fairness are weightier than consistency.
So fairness trumps the literal words.
In this specific context, yes. If you allow the owner to demand strict performance for something so trivial, you are allowing them to be cruel. The law steps in to stop the cruelty.
It's a fascinating balance. On one hand, you have the sanctity of the contract. On the other, you have economic waste and fairness.
And that's really the legacy of this case. It acknowledges that life is messy. Construction is messy. If we demanded 100% perfection for every single term in a contract, no building would ever get paid for.
There's always a scratched tile or a crooked handle somewhere.
Always.
So what does this all mean for us? If I'm looking at a contract dispute, maybe I'm renovating my kitchen or hiring a web developer, how do I know if I'm dealing with a reading pipe situation or a major breach?
If we synthesize everything we've discussed, we can build a diagnostic checklist for analyzing these disputes. Think of this as your framework for spotting the issue before it goes to court.
Walk us through it. What's step one on the checklist?
Step one, check for apt and certain words. Did the parties explicitly state that performance of every single term is a condition of recovery?
Do you have to write it in?
You do. Cardozo explicitly says parties are free to do this. You can demand Vermont granite or else. But you have to be incredibly clear. If the contract is silent or vague, the law presumes against strict conditions.
So if you want to be a tyrant about the details, you have to write it in bold letters. This is a condition precedent.
Exactly. Step 2, analyze the intent. Was the breach willful or fraudulent? This is the venial versus willful distinction.
Right.
If the contractor did it on purpose, if they were trying to cut corners, save money, or cheat you, there is no mercy. The transgressor pays, regardless of the cost.
Okay, so if I find out the builder used the cheap pipe to pocket the difference, the substantial performance defense goes out the window.
Completely. Intent changes everything. Step 3. Weigh the purpose. Materiality. Is the defect trivial, a matter of mere utility, or is it dominant? Does the breach frustrate the very purpose of the contract?
You have to ask, does this thing still work the way it's supposed to?
That's the art versus utility test again.
Okay.
And finally, step 4. Measure the oppression. This is the proportionality test. Is the cost of strict compliance, meaning replacement, grossly out of proportion to the benefit?
Okay.
If tearing down the walls costs $10,000 but only adds $1 of value, the law steps in. Damages are limited to the difference in value.
It really is a logic gate for fairness. It stops people from being petty tyrants over things that don't really matter.
It protects the honest blunderer. That's the key phrase. If you make an honest mistake that doesn't really hurt anyone, the law won't destroy you for it.
Which brings us back to the listener. As you go about your week, maybe take a look at the agreements you make. We're constantly making micro contracts with people. I'll pick up dinner. I'll have that report done by noon.
And inevitably, we slip up. We pick up the wrong brand of soda. We send the report at 12.05.
Exactly. So ask yourself, are you the homeowner demanding the house be torn down because the soda is Pepsi instead of Coke? Or are you the builder, hoping for a little grace for your venial faults?
And remember, if you really, really want that specific brand of soda, you better use apt and certain words to say so.
That's all for this deep dive into Jacob and Young's v. Kent. Thanks for listening.